Good.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Woodbury County Board of Adjustment. Today's date is June 5th, 2023, and the time is approximately 6:01 p.m. Tonight's meeting will be audio taped and the minutes will be prepared. In respect to all parties, we ask that those present turn off cell phones or set them to vibrate. Those in attendance are asked to legibly complete the attendance sheet up there at the front. I'd like to take a moment to review the procedures that the board will follow tonight. First, the board will handle the normal housekeeping agenda items. Then for each application on the agenda, I will open the public hearing on the item. The planning and zoning staff will then present the staff report, including the staff recommendation. Any letters or other communication received from the public prior to the hearing will be entered into the record. The applicant will then have the opportunity to present his or her case and respond to the staff report. Next, we will hear comments from the public. If you would like to speak, either in support of or against the application, you must come to the microphone. Please state your name and address for the record. All interested parties shall be heard, but repetitious comments should be avoided. Repetitious or irrelevant comments may be ruled out of order by the chair. I ask you to remain respectful and courteous to all your comments at all times. After all public comments have been heard, the staff and applicants may make a closing statement. The hearing shall then be closed by motion and vote. Thereafter, no further comments from the staff, public, or applicant may be heard unless asked for by the board. The board shall then deliberate the case and may ask questions of the applicant, the staff, or any party offering testimony. However, such questions do not reopen the hearing for additional comments from the public unless so requested or approved by the board. The board will then formulate and vote on a motion. The motion will typically either grant or deny the requested application. Any board member who has an ex parte communication to place in the record of this meeting should do so prior to the beginning of deliberation of the respective agenda item. Any person desiring to appeal the board's decision to a court of record may do so within 30 days after the filing of this decision with the Planning and Zoning Office. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and proceed down to item 2 with the roll call. It looks like all 5 members are present. At this time, is there any public comment on matters not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to look at the minutes from the last meeting. You guys had a chance to review the minutes. If you have, I'd ask for a motion to approve in a second.
I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Ashley and a second by Tom to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, move down here to item 5. The public hearing is now open. I'm going to ask Dan to read the staff report.
Okay, I just want to mention before I get into that, up on the computer we're having trouble with the recording function, but we do have the 2 backups there for sure. People still have the ability to call in, as I had tested that before, but I just want to make that clear.
Okay.
So as for the staff report, J.B. Holland Construction, applicant and property owner Donald Hennings of the Hennings Joint Trust have filed for a conditional use permit to establish a temporary borrow site to remove earth and material to be used in the phase 1 and 2 of the eastbound Highway 20 project. The proposed temporary borrow pit is located on parcel number 884702100002. The parcel is located on the south side of Highway 20 and is currently used as farm ground. The proposed cut area is 8 to 10 acres, the work area is 10 acres, and the total excavation for export is between 100,000 to 150,000 cubic yards. The parcel is located in the Agricultural Preservation Zoning District. It's not in the floodplain. The applicants have provided the necessary documentation, including the environmental study, NPD S2 permit, stormwater pollution prevention plan. The appropriate stakeholders, including government agencies, utilities, organizations, have been notified and have been requested to comment based on the information received and the requirements set forth in the zoning subdivision ordinance. The proposal meets the appropriate criteria for approval. The Woodbury County Zoning Commission at their May 22nd, 2023 meeting voted 5-0 to recommend approval for this respective proposal. And just for some background, last month this borrow pit, actually the same group requested the parcel that was actually closer to Highway 20 that abutted, so this is sort of an extension onto that project. So that's why.
This is not the one with the Magellan pipeline
No.
through it.
No. This is the one that directly abuts Buchanan there, basically, Highway 20.
Do you have anything else for us on that, Dan?
I do not.
Okay. Is there anyone here that would like to speak or address the board on this?
Adam Larson, I'll be the representative for J.B. Holland from Decorah. This is just a contingency borrow. We ran into the issue with the Magellan one, that further one to the west. That one, we finally got it worked out with landowners, so this will just be as needed. We shouldn't probably have to use this one, but we needed that backup, so we had to get the process started prior to getting it all going. So this was strictly, probably won't have, they didn't get it planned, so it's going to be better for this year, but we would still be continue to use this farmland for the next years.
You guys have any questions on this? This is pretty straightforward. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak on that? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to ask for a motion to close the public hearing on that, unless you have anything to add, Dan. Okay.
I so move.
Okay,
A second.
motion by Pam, second by Bill, close the public hearing. Okay, do we have a suggested motion for this?
We got to vote on that, don't
We do, yep.
I would make the motion proposed in our materials to state a motion to the temporary borrow pit as proposed.
All right, so we have a motion by Ashley. Does anybody have a second? Motion by Ashley, second by Tom. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to allow the temporary borrow pit as proposed, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes 5-0. Okay, Dan, I'd like to move down to the next public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and ask.
You have to read it.
Yes, I have to read. Yep. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing for item number 2 here, and I'm going to ask Dan to read this into the staff report.
Yes, Wi-Fi LLC is the applicant of this, and property owners Brendan and Patricia A. Revocable Trust have filed a conditional use application to place a demand response load resource next to the substation in conjunction with the local electric utility to support grid resiliency for the proposed use to operate a data processing business. The proposed site is on parcel number 864723300010. The parcel is located in the agricultural preservation zoning district and is not in a floodplain. The land use summary table of land uses, section 3.03.4 of the Woodbury County zoning ordinance does not reference data processing on this specific request by the applicant. However, this can be interpreted under section 3.03.3 of the Woodbury County zoning ordinance as a comparable utility use or comparable to the industrial use of research and development laboratories in the sense of data analysis. Therefore, the purpose of this request, data processing can be interpreted as a conditional use permit in this agricultural preservation zoning district. Hence, based on the information received and the requirements set forth in the zoning subdivision ordinances, the proposal meets appropriate criteria for approval. Staff recommends approval. The Woodbury County Zoning Commission on May 22nd, 2023 voted 5-0 to recommend approval of this permit to place a demand resource, load resource next to the substation in conjunction with the local utility to support grid resiliency for the proposed use to operate a data processing business. And that's all I've got.
Okay. Is there anyone here present that would like to address the board on this conditional use permit application? And if you could, state your name and address.
John Paul Barrick at 410 5th Street, Grundy Center, Iowa. I'd like to enter something into, what was it again? Give you guys a pamphlet. I'll enter into evidence.
Into the public record.
Thankfully, we're not that poor.
Okay, I need a motion to receive this.
Sorry.
Oh.
Okay, I have a motion by Doyle.
Second.
Second by Ashley, okay. All in favor of receiving? Aye.
So there's a quick presentation that I prepared, and I'm going to pull up on my phone because I don't have enough copies, but that highlights what a data processing business and what it means for the grid and demand response. So in this packet or pamphlet that you guys received, I highlighted from the 2003 development plan some information that I thought this project helps bring to the table. Wanted to highlight the grid electric consumption on the second page, which shows how the electricity in the grid is fluid. As you guys know, not everyone uses power at the same time every day, and electricity is very expensive to store in batteries or to meet the demand. So the grid operators, Woodbury County REC, is constantly having to meet demand and supply requirements of their consumers, of their ratepayers. So what we're proposing to deploy and build here in Woodbury would help electric cooperatives upgrade their infrastructure without any capital expenses. So we'll be paying for the upgrades to the substation, roughly around $140,000 worth of upgrades. We'll be increasing the revenue for Woodbury County REC at the utility, which will help lower rates for members, and I'll talk more about how that's the case. We'll use more renewable energy, and we'll be adding high-paying tech jobs, which will stay in the county, live in the county, and operate at this facility. The next slide shows demand-side management. It gives some opportunities or some options on what demand-side management looks like. So you might be familiar with the water heater program that a lot of the utilities have here, where they control water heaters. This is an extension of that program, which would allow them to control this data center to reduce demand when times of peak usage is occurring. So that time is going to be in the winter months, in the morning when everyone's waking up and their heaters are turning on, 7 a.m. will be turning off. And then in the summer months, like it is right now, we'll be turning off around 4 to 6 to 7 to 8 o'clock. And that data center operates 24/7 when it's not being requested to turn off its load. And there's some other examples of program considerations. When it comes to demand response on the next slide, you'll see that there are 3 things we consider as a utility or as a user. We have the physics, the human behavior, the economics of it, and there's a bunch of things that are possible, like charging electric vehicles during certain times of the day. There are a lot of things that are practical. Obviously, we want to make sure that if we have an electric car, we can get to where we want to go when we want to go there and it's charged. And then there's some things that are actionable. So this is something that provides an actionable way for utilities to curtail a large amount of energy versus having to just turn off a few hundred water heaters to get the same result. The next few pages show demand response and what the grid looks like. So what you're looking at is a chart from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. You can see that green, or the lighter fade color, is the renewable energy that's being generated on an example grid. This grid's actually in Cedar Falls, Iowa. So this energy is being created, but the load is the blue or the darker color, and no one's using that energy, so you have this excess energy. But then during the time in the afternoon, between 6 p.m. to 2 p.m., you have this need for additional peaker plants or plants to make up the difference. And so this is how most grids operate to meet that demand during the summer, is they'll turn on natural gas or coal plants to meet that demand. The next slide shows what it looks like to add battery. And as you can see, there's a little indication of a little bit darker line, but it doesn't make much of an impact when it comes to adding battery storage to the grid. So what we suggest and what we do with utilities is we add fast-acting flexible load, which we'll show on the next slide. That's that lighter blue between the darker color and the lighter gray more appropriately. So that flexible load allows you to ensure that you can curtail this asset. As you see, it gets shut off when everyone else is running, and it's being turned off from those hours of 6 to 1500 hours, which allows you to use more renewable energy. if you were increasing your renewable energy capacity, you would get more operating hours, which is, I believe, also on the docket today, talking about solar farms and wind farms here in the county. And then, so what we do is we help to basically that peak, we help make sure that peak is lower, and we help utilize renewable energy when no one else is using it. And that last slide shows what it looks like to meet the demand on the peak. The next slide will be a picture of our data center. This is what they look like. They're very minimal construction work. We pour a small slab, I think it's about 4 inches thick, for where we'll set the infrastructure on, the pods on, and then the land there's gravel that's put on there and minimal tree work, but there's no deep foundation work. So we're able to remove this once it's done being utilized and once the lease is up. There's some best practices that we like to maintain as we operate our data centers. We locate next to the substations. So as you can see on that map to your right, the site layout, we are right next to that substation. In this photo up here, you can see that there's no land in between us. The reason why we're so close is, one, it helps us with cost, but two, is we're looking to minimize our impact to any of the surrounding land, any of the surrounding areas. We also cover, as I mentioned, 100% of the infrastructure costs, so there's no cost to members for have us interconnect. There's a 2-month deposit that we'll be posting with the utility. We're air cooled, so that means the only byproduct that this facility has is heat and noise. There's no other type of fuel, there's no other type of liquid that comes out of it. It's simply heat and noise. And this next few slides shows that curtailment example on the PDF that I handed you. That example is when we would be turning off our load. So as you can see, the flexible load here is 10.9 megawatts in this chart, and that in a very short time period of under 30 minutes goes from 10 megawatts down to 97% reduction. So very, very quick and adaptive to meet the grid's demand. If you see farther in the curtailment example, you can see that was a 15% load reduction, and that's turning off our load to meet the grid's demand. I'll leave you with a few more slides. This 2021 theory versus 2022 reality is a case study from a utility who didn't have any demand response in their system. They had this theory of how this would help. They put it to work, and as you can see, the reality and theory look very, very similar, and it achieved the results that they were looking for. This project is a 10-year project. We'll be increasing utilization of the previous built electrical substation. This substation was built originally for the casino in the area. They did not expand fully to meet the demands of the substation. That's what Ken from Woodbury shared with me when we looked at this property. That's why it has extra capacity at it, because they never hit the usage that they mentioned they were going to do. 3 more slides on how it affects the county outside of the grid. This might be a little bit more interesting than the grid section. Is the noise. So from 370 feet away, it's going to be about 45 decibels, and this was recorded with a sound meter. So 45 decibels is about the average home noise, while 60 decibels is normal conversation and background noise. Office noise is around 70 decibels, vacuum cleaner is 75, and we'll be right around 75 when you're within 50 feet of the facility, and as I mentioned, within 370 feet, you'll be less than 45 decibels. So the noise really goes in one direction, and it's something that is, all the neighbors are aware of it. The property we're leasing from is the closest neighbor, so they're understanding of the noise, and they understand the noise that this facility would be generating. As I mentioned, there'll be 2 full-time employees. Average starting wage at our company is $27 per hour. We also have healthcare benefits and bonuses. And the county receives a 1% sales tax on energy. So for this facility, that's roughly $12,000 a year, or $120,000 over the lifespan of the project. And the next one is just a photo of the team. So we really appreciate you guys taking time to consider this conditional use permit, and happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
What's your company name?
It's called Wi-Fi LLC.
Well, okay, you are representing them.
I'm representing them.
Okay.
So then what happens 10 years in one day?
Sure, we would love to continue, so we would negotiate with the landowner and, you know, sign another lease if we could.
Okay.
But if not, then we would break up the concrete, remove the equipment. The substation upgrades would stay at the facility, and then it would be used again for agricultural purposes.
So I have a question. You guys talk about here, you know, using more renewable energy. Where are you coming up with that at? You know, in this-
That's where the demand response conversation comes in. So in order to build out a higher renewable penetration in the area, you need to build that flexible demand, which can utilize that renewable energy when no one else is utilizing it, because you can't store it effectively, so it's going to waste. So those renewable energy developers, when they're looking for facilities when they're looking to put their solar and wind farms, especially with this new Biden Infrastructure Act, they want to ensure that they have people using that energy, because they get paid by the federal government, but they also get paid if people use the power. And so by us locating in this area, we're going to reduce transmission constraints on the grid, which means that if there was area where power was building up because there was solar and wind and no one was using that power, those areas would be congested, they would be constrained. And so by using that energy, we allow them to build more renewable energy.
So in this county, say that doesn't happen. Say no wind flies. I don't know. You know, maybe solar doesn't. You know, because of our setting here. Is this a waste of time for you guys to do this if nothing does get built in this county?
It's more than just the grid operates. This is an SPP grid, so we operate all the way up to May City, Iowa, down all the way to even Arkansas. So you're going to affect your area, but your area is bigger than the county when it comes to the power market. So even if other neighboring counties have wind and solar, those prices, power prices, when your cooperative buys from the SDP node, which is right on the highway where there's a lot of electrical infrastructure, that price determines the price of power for everyone in the nearby community, including here.
So you're not affiliated with any renewable company like Mid-American, NextEra?
Not with any of the energy companies, no. Correct.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any questions?
So you're working with RECs?
With the REC, the local REC. So we have a facility in Grundy County, in Marshall County, and in Osceola with electric. So this would be our fourth facility in Iowa. In Woodbury, as I mentioned, the reason why this area was chosen specifically was due to Woodbury's electric rate and the availability to provide curtailment, but more importantly, the substation having extra capacity and being built out without having insane upgrade costs of millions of dollars, but hundreds of thousands at least.
Well, what do the RECs have though for renewable generation?
I'm unsure about Woodbury REC's specific generation profile, but I do know that they acquire power from the market as well.
Off the grid.
Off the grid. And so the market, even independent energy developers like NextEra, they sell into the market, and then Basin Electric, who Woodbury buys from through NIPCO, they have a scheduling, and they schedule and buy that power from the market operator, which would be SPP.
Okay.
And Woodbury Ken did write us a letter of recommendation, which I believe is in here as well regarding this project.
From the REC.
From
Yeah.
the REC.
And it looked like NIPCO also supported.
Yeah, I think NIPCO had no concerns with the
Right.
project, if I remember correctly. I don't know if they wrote a letter, but we've been working with the NIPCO team specifically on implementing the demand response program with them. We've already set up some trials to get the notifications to make sure that we can respond in a timely manner. So they are preparing for this project.
So why does this have to be done, Dan, on a conditional use permit for them to establish this stuff?
It's an interpretation under section 3.03.3, which basically, because we don't have an enumeration directly in the ordinance, we have to interpret any type of proposal that's not enumerated in there as a likewise use under that. So we brought those two uses together, whether it be research as well as the utility aspect of it, and felt that this fits with the conditional use category versus being an outright use, basically. If it's an outright use, we can just issue building permits, but it would need board approval under the interpretation of those being likewise compared to conditional uses. It's one of those things where technology changes, and the ordinance even says it in there, that the ordinance was passed in 2008, and technology may change, and we have some flexibility for interpretation.
Well, there's no other questions. Thank you for the time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to address the board on this issue? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
I so move.
Okay, we have a motion by Pam, we have a second by Doyle. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Do you have anything else for us, Dan, on this particular matter?
Nothing further.
Okay. Need anybody from the board, do you have any further comments on this? Any more discussion? Would somebody like to make a motion on this?
I would move that we approve the conditional use permit to place a demand response load resource next to the substation in conjunction with the local electric utilities to support grid resiliency for the proposed use to operate a data processing business.
A second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Pam. Did you get all that? Okay, second by Ashley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes 5-0. Okay, moving down, I believe we have some information or discussion from the Woodbury County Comprehensive Plan presentation by Simcoe.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Erin Berzina. I'm the planning director with Simcoe, and I'm Corinne Erickson. I'm a regional planner at Simcoe. We've been working on the Woodbury County Comprehensive Plan 2040 for a while now, a couple, 2.5 years-ish, something like that. Had a rough start with COVID, got back on track. So we just kind of wanted to come and let you guys know kind of where we are in the process. We've been working on the draft, and that draft is complete and is up for public comments and input. And Corinne's going to go over that a little bit. But kind of just wanted to go over, you guys have been on this board and kind of know the ropes. But basically kind of to touch base first on kind of what a comprehensive plan is, and then we're just going to get into like maybe one of the sections a little bit to give you a little background information. But when we started this program, it was awarded some CARES Act grant funding, so we were able to kind of offset the cost. So the county is paying for half of it, and the CARES Act pays for the other half. So just as a background. But starting with what a comprehensive plan is, it's basically a long-term vision for the future. The difference between the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance sometimes trips people up a little bit. So the comprehensive plan kind of lays the foundation of what you envision the county to be. The zoning ordinance puts into place the rules in which you determine how best to develop. So in an ideal world, the zoning ordinance kind of echoes the principles that are in the comprehensive plan. So it almost sits on top of it. It is the basis for policy, and it is very flexible. The zoning ordinance is too, but there are definitely mechanisms from which you can divert from it, like what you guys are doing tonight. So getting kind of beyond that, we do have hopefully this stuff is in your packet too, because that is very small.
We have it.
It's even small on the packet. So the vision statement, we made some changes to, basically where we started with our steering committee was we took the vision statement and then thought, we don't want to throw it out with the trash here because, a lot of it still applies today. And then we just kind of tweaked it with some new ideas and suggestions from the committee. So it still focuses on the rural character and the sense of community. That's probably the biggest underlying theme that we've heard from the public, from our steering committee, et cetera. So we talk about how land development is managed in a way that enhances the character, that it upholds residents' ideals, that we talk about economic development being rooted in diverse agricultural existing businesses and industry, but also creating an environment for new enterprises as well. We talk about conservation and stewardship of natural resources as a matter of pride and ownership in the county. Demand for quality and affordable standard of living, including housing and other quality of life provisions. And then the final statement, we didn't change that too much, and that was kind of the over-encompassing view of what government is. It exists to serve the people and protect the public health, safety, and welfare to ensure a resilient and prosperous future. So the next little, very hard to read section, basically we took an inventory. We started out by taking an inventory of the county, what's here, what's, what the demographics are, background information, stuff like that. And then also took inventory of what people's thoughts were on the current conditions, what the strengths were, what we could work on. And then developed draft goals and objectives based on that. So, and then from there, we talk about, okay, we have these draft goals and objectives, how do we get there? How do we implement them? And the time frame and things like that. So where we are right now, we just did the final public open house, and I say final because we may end up with some extra time to do more before it's all said and done and it goes for final approval. So we will see. But we are under a public review period that we may extend. It just kind of depends. We'll have to talk to Dan about that schedule. But so that's where we are. I don't think I forgot anything.
So on the plan timeline, I see that
Yeah.
there's the planning and zoning board approval.
Yes.
When are
And it
you?
will come here.
And it will come to,
Yeah,
that's
it'll
what
come
I
back to you
was
too.
wondering.
I don't
Okay,
know what's missing. I'm sorry.
not a problem. Are we hoping, I see that the public hearing summer of 2023, so for the board of
Yes.
supervisors, so.
It may be delayed a little bit.
Okay.
And I don't know if we'll touch on that or not, but it just may, we just may have to push it down the road a little bit
Okay.
for some other
I was
things that are
curious.
coming on. Let's see.
Seem pretty sure about that.
Yeah, it's a good chance. There's just a lot going on for sure.
Okay, so with this packet, you have a whole bunch of pages on housing and economic development and land use and all kinds of things. So each one of those pages is a chapter, and I'm kind of gonna turn it over to Corinne, kind of on one of the chapters.
Yeah, sure. So if you want to scroll to land use, we've been using this as kind of just an example of a set of goals that we've developed. So, there's a lot of information here. I'm not going to read through every single, it's a lot of words to get through. Just to kind of give you the highlights and the main themes from this chapter. Our goals here for land use and natural resources are to support sustainable agricultural practices, preserve environmentally sensitive lands, limit urban sprawl, and maintain the rural character of the county, empower landowners to be a partner in combating invasive species, reduce contaminants in surface water runoff, safeguard groundwater by limiting sources of pollution, identify sources of air quality hazards, maintain safe distances between industrial land use and all other land uses, and then plan for the creation and use of alternative and renewable energy sources. And then we also also, through our public input, we've been taking a land use map to, encourage comments from the public on what they see as changing in the future. And then we've also used individual cities' comprehensive plans to see what changes to anticipate outside of their jurisdiction. So I think Aaron is going to go over the land use map that we've kind of made changes to since the last plan. Just some of the main highlights here.
I didn't understand why in that map, why the towns are colored orange and it says that it's transitional agriculture.
Yeah, that is one of the designated land use, and it basically is that buffer area between, and we do have a definition page too, that kind of goes into it a little bit more, but it's that buffer area between the town, between that jurisdiction, and then transitioning into agriculture. So you might have, maybe small, you might have an acreage, you might have a, 3 acre, home that just somebody wanted more space, or they have a few horses or something like that, so it'd be a little bit bigger. So it's kind of just that gray area between that and fields.
Okay.
Or farm. But the definition of that, I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead, but land in the transitional agriculture designation typically borders between traditional agricultural use and residential uses. So it offers flexibility in the development of a variety of compatible land uses based on the surrounding context and needs of the community. And you will notice too in the map that each town is gray because they have their own future land use map and their own comprehensive plan, their own rules, their own ordinance. So what we did do with this was go through every town, looked at their land use maps as best we could. Some of them were more difficult to find than others, and tried to kind of match up as best we could to what their plans were as well. So you will notice that this map does not follow parcels. So we don't go through, and the last plan was like this too, we did not go through and individually identify everybody's piece of land, every single little parcel. So this is meant to be more of a broad stroke of, not every single parcel in the middle of the county is agricultural. Like it's not one gigantic field, as you know. But what you will find is it's still the majority is that light green for agriculture, and then some of the major changes, as you would guess, are mostly around the urban areas, the major urban areas. So I wish I had put in here some close-ups, but I did not. So the major changes that you are going to see are around Sergeant Bluff, obviously, a little bit around Sioux City, but not as much. And you will see some changes around along Highway 29, I-29, and Highway 20. So what happened on, I'm going to start with Highway 20. That has developed along Highway 20, that corridor. We did extend more commercial uses along the highway between Lawton and Sioux City. So, and some of that has to do with, some of it was there before. A lot of it was there before. But especially with the extension of water sewer under 75 north, Highway 20 and 75, that was extended for the new Iowa DOT and Simcoe facility on that northeast corner. So now that that connection is there, it sure opens up a lot of opportunities for that to develop into probably other supporting uses. That is one change. Next change, I'm going to go down to, we really didn't have a lot in Sioux City because not a lot, it was already kind of designated the way it was already. So that what we both have makes sense. Sergeant Bluff, there were some changes around there. We did add, so I'm sure you guys know, maybe not, the Southbridge interchange, south of Sergeant Bluff, in the county. In the county, and that we put, of course, we would expect that to develop out, and it would probably either be a light industrial or a heavy commercial for supporting heavy truck traffic. So could be, but I would just anticipate seeing something along the lines of maybe not a welding facility, but a light industrial like that that's in off of Sloan. What is it, GW? I can't remember. So that has some changes, kind of building that area up a little bit more industrial on that side as well. Heading down to Sloan, we also did add a little bit more commercial in the Sloan interchange / town area as well, around in there. Those are the major changes. A lot of the development patterns aren't going to change too much outside of the urban-ish core and some of the changes that we know already. We did change a little bit in Mobile as well. We took into account the last time this plan was done, we did not have full lanes on 20 yet. So, yeah, it was 2003-ish. It was a rainy time, 3-ish. So that's that part. Do you have any questions on the map? I'm going to talk about the designations super briefly.
You've got rural residential.
Yeah.
Kind of follows the blacktops.
Yes.
Those are farm to market roads. And is this something we need to address on the zoning side? If we make those like city streets and you've got all these farmers driving down their semis, they just become very dangerous.
The rural residential, understood. The rural residential designation, I'm going to get over here now. Yeah, it does primarily address residential areas outside of city limits, but it's not necessarily tied to that. Rural housing developments, yeah, we might have to take a look at that.
If I may, that particular area has been used a lot for rezones for the agricultural estates district. Much more, the suburban residential is typically 10,000 square foot lots, which more so reflects city. But typically up through, at least the current plan, and what would be the practice right now is if somebody were to rezone from an AP, agricultural preservation, over to agricultural estates, that would be the basis of that thought process on flipping it over. And most of the time when we flip from AP to AD, it's to increase density. But much of our residential living out in Woodbury County are on at least the minimum 2-acre lot, which is the agricultural estates lot. So that's kind of, when we look at that corridor or that area, that's been more so focused in on the AP lots and not the suburban residential lots, which have a tendency to be like down by Browns Lake or by the fringe of Sioux City on the very edge. The one area I can think of is just east of Fleet Farm. That particular area, you have some suburban residential, but it would be very rare, I think, to stick suburban residential out in the middle of the county.
Well, like 141, those lots are actually pretty good size, but those driveways are not very far apart. And that's a heavily traveled road and like harvest time and
Yep.
and for some reason bicyclists like to go on the narrow road also. Well, you see other areas, Lamar's is a good example. They've grown out, so now your major, your what used to be a major thoroughfare is now a city street. And that would be the part that I would like to, a lot of it would have to do with how you put driveways in.
Right.
Do we force them to do frontage roads? There's that one down by Sergeant Bluff. There's that on the east side of Sergeant Bluff. That's got a frontage road all the way down the county road. Something like that.
And we've seen those as part of proposals in the past, for sure. I remember a couple of years ago, there was down near Bronx in a subdivision debate that came up where county engineer had required shared driveways as part of the recommendation, but he kind of preferred a frontage road scenario. So the rezone debate or the subdivision debate is very unique to each and every single area. And the conditions, there can definitely be conditions put on the way the zoning is written right now to scrutinize those respective areas. So we've definitely had those debates.
Something that caught my eyes, I guess not with the map, but the land use and natural resources. You guys think it's possible to maintain the rural character of Woodbury County and then plan for the creation and use of alternative or renewable energy sources? I mean, what do you mean by that? When you're talking renewable energy sources, what are we talking about? Are you talking about wind turbines and solar?
Wind, solar, yes, alternative forms of energy. The reason why we kept it in, because we've had this discussion a few different times, the reason why we kept it in is because when you think about the last time this plant was created, right? We didn't have a lot of, I mean, they existed, of course, but we didn't have a lot of the technology that we do and the materials and supplies and the network that we do now then. So putting it in here vaguely, we have absolutely no idea, at least the layperson has absolutely no idea what kind of technology comes and what that looks like 20 years from now. Could the wind turbines be slight? Could they be poles? Could they be, we don't know what the think tanks in the technology world are thinking of. So keeping it in there as a broad interpretation doesn't mean it's coming. It doesn't mean that,
Because I mean, you were aware of that fight in the county.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's not popular.
Oh, yeah, we know it's not popular.
Did somebody have was there a group pushing that paragraph in here? Is that something you guys carried over? Because I mean, just to me, as a farmer, fifth generation farmer, lives right amongst the Loess Hills, I don't see those two coinciding, especially when we talk down here about maintaining the view of the Loess Hills and stuff,
I understand. And we did get feedback from it, from, our public input surveys and stuff, and we got all different kinds. So we did try to incorporate everything and keep things in as a just in case, not as the county is advocating for this to happen one over the other. How do I say this? I don't anticipate there to be a huge influx of big wind or solar energy outfits in the county. But leaving it in there opens up not just for commercial, but for private as well. For private landowners to do with what they will with their land as things maybe progress and get less visually invasive and safer.
Well, and I think when you're looking into the future, like you said, nobody can guess what's going to happen in the future, but you've got to leave some leeway to allow for innovation for, people to come in and we need to have some kind of renewable energy sources, I think, and leaving it in there allows, even though you're leaving it broad, allows you to do whatever you have to do to make things happen.
And again, as you noted, like 20 years ago was the last time this was updated. And so, like you said, a lot can change in that amount of time. But we don't have the opportunity to come back in 5 years if we learn new information. So I totally support the broad use of that.
So there is still some public comment time on some of this.
Yeah. Do you want to touch on that? You're kind of jumping around. But
Yeah, who should the comments be directed towards and such?
Either one of us, there is,
So you can definitely email us directly. We also have an online really open-ended comments that you can submit on any section, so that we're encouraging people to use. And on that topic, I did want to go through, just kind of get into more detail on the public input process that we've gone through, kind of in the background of this process. So when we first started the plan, we had a survey, a public input survey. We received about 460 responses. So that gave us a really good basis for just getting the public's input on some of these goals and themes. And then we also, last fall, we hosted 4 open houses throughout the county. So those were held in Hornick, Millville, Sergeant Bluff, and Anthem, just to share our draft goals and objectives with the public. And then we had, in April, it was a final open house to present the draft plan. And so at each of these open houses, we've had basically what you see in your packets, blown up on posters, and just encourage people to walk around and learn about any of the topics they're interested in. And then for every in-person event we also, through flyers and social media and things like that, we encourage people to use an online platform if they couldn't make it to the in-person events. We advertised the events in local newspapers, our website and the project website, and then the clerks in each city were also helping us to promote those events to the public. So yeah, now we are in our final comment period on the draft, but it's kind of an open-ended comment period now, so there's plenty of time for review. And we've also sent the complete draft to stakeholders, including the cities and then agencies for natural resources, economic development, transportation, and health and social services as well. So we've gotten a couple of comments from those entities as well. And then some of the themes that came out from our survey data that we tried to tie into every chapter. Residents tended to express concern over urban and suburban sprawl coming from the Sioux City metro area. Again, the desire to maintain the rural character of the county, more opportunities for outdoor recreation, protection of open spaces, and the improvement of conservation areas. And then they seem to really value the rural character, clean air and water, and access to open space and public lands in general. So those are kind of themes that we try to tie every chapter in our vision statement as well.
I'm going to draw your attention to one more thing. I'm going to go back 1 second to the future land use kind of section. When this was done before, there were no definitions set up at all for our land use categories. We have them for zoning categories, but not for land use. So we went ahead and did some research and wrote definitions to incorporate into this plan. So we kept the land use designations the same as they were before, but just put some kind of a definition with them, because there can be some assumptions made that probably shouldn't be when you're going to talk about interpreting things if people question. So that's a little extra, something you can look at, because it is a brand new element that wasn't there before. So we do encourage you to take a look. I put some of my business cards up here. If anybody wants to take any, you can email either Corinne or I. I'm Erin B, and she's just Corinne. So I was Erin, and then I left some And then also we had some little handouts too of what is in your packet if you want them. Online on the website, simco.org, under current projects, you can actually zoom in and read it better. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, what's up next?
I believe you have some discussions about the meeting and time location changes.
Yeah, I was asked to run by both the zoning commission and the board of adjustment, the times that are met and the places are met. There's been kind of concerns about, I guess, from the security perspective of supervisors typically meet at 4:30 and they're much more tied in for the day versus waiting for the meeting to start at 6 o'clock. And so basically we were asked to see if the board would have any opinions on possibly adjusting the meeting times to something maybe earlier. I think 4 o'clock has been something, or 4:30, and I'm just simply at this point asking, this is certainly not, this is an information item, so it's not to, change policy or anything, but simply ask the board members how you feel about the meeting time and how we would feel about going up as early as 4 o'clock. So I'll just put that out there to you.
One problem I potentially see with that is just, maybe for those of us that might have children in school, where we have to pick them up, so that could be a possibility, potential problem.
It depends on the day. So like if we were to keep it on the first Monday, if this meeting was at 4:30, I would not be able to make it from Des Moines. I mean, I can barely get here by 6. So there's absolutely no way I'd be able to retain membership if that was the case.
We went through this, 5 years ago? Or?
Oh, probably well before my time. So,
Oh, it was before your
way
time.
before.
I think that's an issue. If we make it earlier, it makes it harder for people working a 9-to-5 job
Yeah.
to take the time and
Or even chores, farming, like
Yeah.
you
I
can
know-
generally get done around 6, but like anything earlier than that, if you're like feeding cattle like we do or plant any of that stuff, like it gets hard.
See, the supervisors, their time slot, they're getting compensated for that.
Yes.
Where we're not, so it's really voluntary, out of the kindness of our heart to.
We used to get $15 a meeting.
What did
And
you
the
do?
supervisor said that was too much. Was that before your time?
That was, yeah. I will say this, you do by your bylaws or the rules of procedure that you had recently adopted that became in effect in 2022, you do control the time that you meet. However, the supervisors ultimately have control over the building. So this would be kind of a cooperative effort if you were to ever decide to change the respective time to something maybe on par with how they meet. The supervisors do have the 4:30. So again, I'm just throwing on, this is just information collecting right now.
Well, I think that's a good point because we talked about it a little bit that maybe we should look at moving the venue if it would make, because it's the security out here is the main reason why they're doing it.
Is there anything that says it has to be in Sioux City?
There is nothing, I don't believe, in there that
I'm
ties.
sure we
to
could
her.
find a place in Mobile.
I know. I
We have
know.
that county office in Mobile,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's got everything we would need.
What's
They
the
probably have a
result?
meeting table.
The engineer's
That's
office is in Mobile.
Oh, yeah, out on
Yeah.
front
They
of
don't
Furniture.
afford it, or used to.
Yeah.
Like Furniture Road.
If I may, you definitely have to have facilities that acknowledge the public, give the public full access. We haven't had a whole lot of those meetings where you have 30, 40 people, but there's always the
Right.
potential for
And that would be confusing if it got too big, we'd probably have to come down and use the downstairs. And that would be confusing to people that we're out there at one meeting, we're back here at another.
Consistency is always important for the public, for sure, when we're trying to get people to come, for sure.
And I don't know what the facilities really are out there in Mobile.
There's quite a few, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the community center,
That's good.
you've got the small meeting room, you've got the large meeting room. So if you met in the small meeting room on your regular monthly meeting times and you had to have a larger space, just move into the large room. You know, it's,
Then would there be, I mean, would you have to pay a fee to use the?
I think that's a negotiable thing. I think,
County's already paying for the library, aren't they? That's a bone of contention too.
Generally, what I'm definitely looking to report back, at least for informational purposes, is the willingness to hold closer to 4:30 or 4 o'clock. If that's a flat no-go, please face it.
I mean, it would be a flat no-go for me.
it would be I'm in favor for me, just because I have another meeting that starts at 7, and it's really, I mean, many times, tonight, it was a really important one. I needed to be there, and, you know, I'm not gonna make it. So, you know, a 4 o'clock meeting would solve all my problems, because then I could be at my meeting by 7, hopefully. But, I'd be happy with an earlier time, but I know that doesn't help a lot of the rest of you, so.
I think we need to keep it as open as possible to all people who are working jobs and everything, to be able to be on this board and to show up to meetings from the public.
Yeah, that's true. The earlier meeting time might affect the public input we might receive also because of the work schedule.
And I will say the zoning commission, they looked at this a couple weeks ago, and they were kind of between 4:30 and 5 for some. The work schedule thing was definitely brought up as well, so they're kind of in that 5 o'clock / 4:30 kind of thought process. But they didn't really address switching nights or anything, but so far it's more about the timing basically and the logistics of security. So.
Well, I think the next question is, can we get by without security if we go to a different location?
We don't need, I mean,
I don't think.
Well,
We don't
needs
need
that.
security.
The other thing is,
I think the building needs
the
security.
building is what needs
It's
security,
not
not
us.
our meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and we could have a while back said maybe the LEC over here could have been an option, but we all know now that the LEC is going away. That's probably not in the cards, but they do have a conference room over there that would work pretty good, but I don't see that as feasible. But we're still trying to, collect and feel this out and kind of see. So that's why it's just a feeler, not an action item tonight. So, but I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, how about solar energy requirement proposals?
Yeah, on the last zoning commission meeting, a proposal was brought up and voted on to look at solar energy in a kind of a two-pronged process. One was for the residential solar, where you could possibly just get a building permit, put a panel or so up on your property and have it self-sustain the property. The other was to allow for the opportunity to put a C in the AP column. And what I mean by that is create a conditional use permit opportunity where a landowner could bring a proposal to the zoning commission and to the board of adjustment directly to review if they were looking at maybe a utility scale level. And I want to be really clear, it's the C. It's not an ordinance. It's for running it through the conditional use process. And to summarize this, what happened at the zoning commission is they voted on a recommendation over to the board of supervisors to put the C in the AP column, as well as to allow for the accessory use. What it would mean for a personal residential is you put an A in the column across, which means that if you run a business or you have a house and you simply want to empower your facility right on your own property, collecting your own, that would be fine with a building permit. Commissioner Bride had mentioned the need for a concept called net metering, where if you're doing it on your own individual parcel, you could go create a situation with REC or someone that you would do the net metering, meaning that so much power comes in, or you could use them like a battery and shift it back into the grid. What Tom had told me is the net metering is something that is not recognized for other power companies necessarily, and even the relationship with the respective power company like REC would likely end and be timed, because it's actually, according to Tom, not in the major interest of the utility to serve as the battery. And so the zoning commission asked that this be sent to the county attorney's office to look at the net metering concept before it gets sent up to the board of supervisors. So basically right now the language is being looked at, as well as what happened at the zoning commission level to decide okay, what needs to be in there before it goes up to the board of supervisors. But right now the proposal basically is the C for utility, and then the accessory structure with the figuring out the net metering, whether you do the net metering or not. So
Putting the C in there, was there any conditions about like a percent slope of the land, you know, in the hills versus, or is it just wide open anywhere in the county?
it was put in with the C. And what they referenced in the meeting was when you do a conditional use and you bring it to the zoning commission, you look at the big picture on the land and everything there. So what happens is you find a location, and for most of these proposals, we do an analysis of where it is, the zoning district, the elevations, you'll see those in the reports. We'll look at the soil types and everything. So it was referenced in the meeting that when you have the authority of a conditional use, those concepts can be brought up by the zoning commission to look through the public safety and everything of the nature, and it could likely be done based on conditions. So if an issue is identified inside of the conditional use proposal, then reasonable conditions could possibly, and we're fully hypothetical here, but reasonable conditions could be authored that can handle issues that are identified. So conditional uses are very location specific, just like the two you had tonight with the borrow pit, with the energy scenario there. They talked about decibels. You talk about anything that is appropriate for the respective area, and if a red flag of any kind is ever identified, and that's what the authority and having the reins through zoning is there to look at. So when you put a C in a column, a C doesn't necessarily grant the right to put it there. What a C does is it has to be reviewed thoroughly in order to decide whether that requested activity could actually be put there. And can it meet the conditions or can it not meet the conditions? And that's what zoning commission and board of adjustments jobs are to do, is to look into those scenarios.
But with that conditional use permit, we can put parameters on that in a broad sense that it wouldn't come to the board every time for those parameters.
You develop precedent when you look at things for the most part. What happens is an application comes in. We have some precedents here tonight when we look at borrow pits. Well, we had a borrow pit a week ago, or a couple weeks, or last month. You look back and you see how does this fit comparative to that as part of the consideration. We had a solar park, Mid-American had one down by Port Neal Road in the general industrial area a couple of years ago. So if we were to get another one, I guarantee you we all might be going back and looking at how the Board of Adjustment ruled on that. And so you do develop precedent, but location still matters there. You have precedent, usually you follow the precedent, but you might have an aspect of the location, and that's what we look for under conditional uses, is there any pitfalls to putting the project there? We all have to find what those pitfalls are, or the items that either support a project or do not support a project. It comes down to, is it gonna meet the public health and safety standards? Is it gonna meet all the criteria? And if something that you don't see clearly meeting that criteria, that's when a condition comes into place. And so conditions are meant to, something might be insufficient here, but if somebody does this, this, or this, they can move it up to par to be compliant if they agree to those standards. If there's no way that somebody could meet those standards, then you get to the point of, wait a minute, it doesn't meet this, doesn't meet this, maybe this can't be approved. So you look at the big scope picture, and obviously, yes, history is important, and what has happened in those previous applications are definitely helpful to the overall process.
Well, I think that would be an issue. In fact, I know one of the board members at least made a mention of that being an issue, that if we can't put some sort of parameters, we went, 15 years or so without a farmer on the Board of Supervisors. These boards change the makeup of the board, and I know that they were talking that if we can't protect those hills for sure, that their vote would be no. And I think there's a lot of people in the public that feel that way. We just have an extremely diverse county. And I know there was another board member that his first thought was, hey, the hills are where these things belong, like out in pastures. Well, you just completely destroy that ground if you put those solar panels on it. Any place where the water drops off of something, it just keeps dropping, you'll have a canyon in a very short period of time. And I would worry about if the ground that we deal with is rare worldwide, and if you were to get to the point where you didn't have many board members, I could see something in the hills slipping through, and it would be a train wreck.
That's kind of the comments I received as a potential slope limitation on potential solar ordinance. So is that something the supervisors could put in, or would that have to start at the zoning level and say, well, we'll put the C in, but we also have these parameters on, slopes in the county?
Right now, the proposal is pretty much geared toward having the C. And the reason we have C's across the board is we have lots of uses that are out there. And the C puts the light on the issue. And what I mean by the light is it requires that neighbors are notified within 500 feet. It brings everybody in that would have a voice. Makes it a very public process that we contact everyone. We contact various groups, the NRCS, others, and have them comment. I have folks all the time, especially when we do subdivisions, tell me, this is near a flood area, there could be runoff here, and I know that at times that's heavily considered by the zoning commission when they look at those matters. And so having it be a very public process, somebody highlights, I remember a couple of years ago we had one where somebody said, this area is not in the floodplain, but it collects water. Anecdotally, this area collects water. It's dangerous to put some things here, is what they had said. So we had a number of people come out from the public that were engaged in that respective issue. And so that actually led to some conditions on this particular proposal. And so that's where the sky is the limit in terms of flexibility when it comes to the neighbors being a part of it, the board being a part of it, and well researching these things. And so I would have to say that we don't want anything to slip through. We want to know what soils are. We want to know what elevations are. And so it's a matter of deciphering what each case is, kind of on a case-by-case basis. And that's the challenge with zoning as a whole. We were like what Aaron and Karina had said tonight, you sort of take that whole county, you wipe a brush across and say AP here, AP here. We all know that AP is different in southern Woodbury County as it is in northern Woodbury County. But it's tougher at times, and the way the zoning ordinance is to create, okay, this policy for this spot, this policy for this spot. So you almost have to go down to the micro, and that's what conditional use permitting does. It goes right down to the micro in terms of this spot, this location. Is this suitable? is it not suitable? And if you have more eyes on it, you have the agencies, and these agencies are not afraid to tell you no too, if they really feel that something should not be there. The Natural Resource Conservation Organization, the Conservation Board has made recommendations as well. So identifying those issues helps all of us, staff, zoning commission, as well as yourself, is seeing what they point out. Is that a fact? Does that need more research? And so I would have to say conditional uses are research intensive if they're done right. And that,
Now, you said 500 feet.
Conditional uses are 500 feet unless you're doing something as such as a cell tower is actually 1 mile.
The notification.
The notification where each landowner would get a letter directly telling them that the meeting will be on this night, encouraging their comments as well as their
So
participation.
this would only be 500 feet, is that what we were?
That's what I'm
It's
asking.
500 feet from footprint. So if you have,
That's not very much. How do you get out of, I can put that in the middle of my parcel and have no neighbors.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean,
We've got large enough tracts of land that you could have a very large solar farm and have no neighbors contacted.
But there can be enumerations in there where there's different subdivisions take 1,000 feet. The cell tower definitely 1 mile. So it depends on how that's addressed. But
Yeah.
borrow pits are 500 feet. Everything pretty much throughout the ordinance is 500 feet.
most of my farmland is classified as highly erodible land, and if I don't have a certain amount of residue on that, the NRCS can come out and find me for it, so the slope thing really bothers me,
And they would be contacted, and they're always a big part of these conditional use ones. And
Well, do they have anything in their policy for this? I mean, they usually follow policy.
they would follow policy. They comment once in a while. I hear more out of Neil Stockfluff with with the conservation board quite a bit. He'll comment on the subdivisions, and he'll point out the floodplain or the different elevations. And he's made comments that I don't think structures should be out there. I don't think this should be out there. And again, those comments are very helpful because then it creates the further conversation on how land intends to be used. And the nice part about a conditional use is you're being asked for the particular use. There's no hiding around on what it is you're going to want to do, versus if somebody comes to me and they just want to build a shed, and they just say, oh, the shed is for accessory purposes, then all of a sudden, wait a minute, now we find a zoning violation that it's something else. This here is where the sun shines, where we can learn fully and have the ability to ask questions. And the key is question asking.
Well, I have no problem with the conditional use, but I'm under the impression that we can designate what type of ground that conditional use can be in before we allow it. It's my opinion.
Yeah, they're very geared toward whether or not you do it in a zoning district. So the C, the biggest thing to keep something off of land is just to keep it prohibited.
Well, then let's make a light industrial that goes south of the industrial.
Well,
that's kind of where it is, I think.
That's where it wants to go.
The issue is that the way the ordinance is written and why it's being considered as a proposal is because if you wanted to put up a utility solar scale, you would have to ask for a rezone. And when you ask for a rezone in the middle of an island, it's basically a big no-no in zoning.
Yeah, I'm not asking for that.
So I'm just saying that our process does not facilitate. Let's say you have the perfect farm ground that is nowhere near anybody that might be a reasonable place for one. Then you try to go through the rezone, and you're likely going to get denied that way. And what the conditional use simply does is you put the C in there. It allows an applicant to come in and have the opportunity to maybe get a permit. They might get it, they might not. And so the conditional use is just simply the opportunity to ask.
Well, I guess where I'm coming from is Port Neal is way more full than what people think it is. Yeah, there's a lot of land, but a lot of those businesses have to have so many acres around them anyhow. We need more industrial land. Let's add another light industrial that we would intend maybe someday becoming a full industrial.
Yeah, it's very, as far as districts, it's quite a process where it would take landowners to have to go through the process of actually flipping the district. And it's done by legal description. It's done by meetings of the zoning commission and the board of supervisors that ultimately flip them. So you would almost have to grow it out with a lot of cooperation. Or if you were to take that general plan and take that map, and Aaron and Corrine would say, okay, we're going to make this whole area here industrial. That's kind of a big brush stroke too, because then now it's farming versus industrial, whereas the conditional use could at least be a bit more flexible. So,
well, farming and industrial go together quite well.
But some uses do shut off. Of course, you have grandfathering or legal non-conforming, but in the end, you can do so much in this one, you can do so much in this one, and you lose your ag rights, and then you go to commercial. So it gets very intricate as far as the respective districts. So that's just simply why the C is just being floated. It's only a proposal, so
yeah.
It just depends on how the public takes it.
I personally think we need the increase in our industrial in the county anyhow. It's my thought. And there isn't anybody lives down there to speak of. I mean, that's a very open area.
But as far as kind of the process, the county attorney is basically looking at what the zoning commission did at that point, and eventually it'll either go to the supervisors or it could go back to the zoning commission. So we'll just kind of hang tight and see what kind of goes on next. So that's all I really got, but that's kind of at least the rationale as far as the zoning. So.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for all that. It's a lot to take in. Do we have any public comment on matters not on the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, do we have any board member comment or inquiry on anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Seeing none of that, is there any further staff update that we need to be aware of?
Yes, one. You may have seen my name on the supervisor agenda last week with the Highway 20 project going on, and you just approving a borrow pit. We ran into a scenario in the ordinance where the temporary construction activities are actually prohibited, which can adversely affect the Highway 20 project. And so if somebody were to set up an asphalt mixing temporary plant or concrete plant or do any crushing, they can't do it on a general commercial district. And the Highway 20 corridor has quite a bit of commercial there. So at this point, I've had to tell contractors, you can't work on the Highway 20 project from right there.
There's a big pile of bumps right there.
So I brought that to the attention of the supervisors, and they basically directed the zoning commission to take up an ordinance amendment to put the C in for the general commercial as well as the highway commercial, so that conditional uses could be considered for future construction projects, whether they're in ag or on commercial land. It's okay at AP and everything, it's just that we ran into commercial parcel and you can't do that stuff there.
So will we be back in here next week addressing that to keep that project moving forward then?
Well, the supervisor, it would be zoning commission and board of supervisors that ultimately make the call on ordinance changes. But if it gets changed and it becomes a conditional use, then if somebody brings an application to zoning commission, your board would ultimately decide those applications if that becomes part of the ordinance. So that's all I got for staff updates.
Okay. We have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
I second.
All right. Motion by Tom, second by Pam, we're adjourned. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.